If I had any conference realignment advice for anybody in 2024, it would be this. Listen to the full clip, read the full story every single time. That's probably not a bad advice for everyday life, whether it's politics or financials or college football news or sports news in general. It's probably better to read the full clip and watch the full story unfold than to just take a headline for what it's worth. Commissioner Greg Sankey had some thoughts about Florida State and made some comments on them potentially being added to the SEC through the next round of realignment. And so take a look at this tweet from On3. Now, they were sharing a video from the Next Round Live pod, and they said, "We're not going to take our pie and slice it into more pieces," basically quoting Commissioner Sankey. And so people have run with that. People have said, it's apparent that the SEC is saying no to Florida State, and then Clemson and others, obviously. We're not adding teams. We're not going to cut up our pie and downsize people's payouts because that's just not what we're going to do in the SEC. And so that's what gets shared. However, that's not the full clip. That's not all that was said. And so let's do you guys a solid and let you listen to what Commissioner Sankey said.
Well, we really had this great session, Mr. Where I talked about really focused on our 16. And our presidents have said very clearly, we're not going to be entangled in legal issues around any consideration of expansion. So it's not a conversation.
Okay.
Yeah. And we're not going to take our pie and slice it into more pieces. We have to grow the pie.
Wait. I thought it just said we're not going to take our pie and slice it into more pieces. And that was the end of the quote. That was all that needed to be said. But Commissioner Sankey went on from there. He literally gave a qualifier. He said, we're not going to cut up our pieces of the pie, but if somebody was going to be added, they have to grow the pie. Well, obviously, right? Now, he's talking to someone there when he says that, or he's at least referring to someone, and it's not who you think. But first, what does he mean there? Well, obviously, the payouts are split evenly. ESPN and the SEC signed a media rights deal, and they pay out X number of dollars per year. It increases annually, and then it gets split evenly 16 ways. If Florida State was to join, they would cut the pie 17 ways. If Florida State and Clemson joined, they'd have to then cut that pie 18 ways instead of the current 16. Now, there's a notion out there that Florida State doesn't bring any value. What value does Florida State or Clemson, what do they bring to the SEC? There's a narrative around the TV model and adding new states and the way that you need to go after new markets and media markets and things that are really, really important to conference realignment and what matters to adding teams. That's why North Carolina and Virginia often get mentioned as two of the more premier programs that people might like to add. Then there's the other side of things. People will say that doesn't matter. There's just about streaming. It's about number of eyeballs now. There aren't traditional cable packages anymore. It's more about just number of eyeballs. Markets don't matter. What kind of value does Florida State and Clemson potentially bring? Well, recently the ACC said that they could lose up to $200 million annually. In court, they said they could lose up to $500 million, $200 million annually if Florida State and Clemson leave the ACC in revenue. But don't buy the clickbait BS about Florida State and Clemson not bringing any value. It is silly. Florida State and Clemson add a ton of value, and the commissioner knows this. ESPN knows this. The ACC knows this. They're telling a judge, this right now in arguments. Now, remember, I told you, I said I was going to tell you who he was talking to when he said they have to grow the pie. I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. But did you hear how much he was deflecting in the actual clip? If you haven't watched it yet, here's how he started out being asked about it.
So one of your first comments was 16 today, 16 tomorrow. And Florida State has been a big talking point. So what are positives with Florida State and what are negatives? Florida State was a great brand at one time. I'm not going to put words in your mouth. I don't think the SEC needs Florida State, but is there something that is alluring about Florida State?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, I mean, okay, let me try to simplify this. Florida State is not happy in the ACC. Would you give me that? They don't seem happy.
Right. From the outsider's view, I guess it seems that way.
So,
It's-
okay.
He obviously didn't want to talk about this, and he sidestepped much of this. And he certainly has been less definitive in this interview than everyone else has been. Everyone else who is speculating by telling you that this shot or this statement or this comment absolutely means this, or even that On3 tweet, which I'm not even blaming On3. I'm just saying that tweet that On3 posted, and it's got Stuart Mandel and others quote tweeting it saying, oh, obviously the SEC is not going to give Florida State any money. ESPN is not going to give money there. But wait, who is he talking to, though, then about growing the pie? Well, the answer to that is he's talking to nobody. He's not saying that to a soul. And what do I mean by that? Well, he wasn't giving you any information there in talking about how they're not going to split up their parts of the pie and how they needed to grow the pie if somebody was to come in. He wasn't giving any information there. He wasn't saying anything. In fact, he was deflecting harder there than he was when he acted like he didn't know, and he joked around with the guys about, oh, I'm not sure what you're talking about. Florida State, you know, he absolutely was deflecting there. And at first, my thought when I first heard it was, oh, he's talking to the TV folks. He's talking to ESPN. He's signaling that it's going to take more money from ESPN to get big brands into the conference. And that's how you're going to have to add to the pie. That's how you're going to have to grow the pie. But then I started to dive a little bit more into this, and I was actually sent this screenshot from Brett McMurphy. It's an article that came out last year. Check this out. It says, and then there's the SEC. In 2020, the SEC signed a 10-year media rights deal with ESPN that's worth around $300 million. The deal starts in 2024, and it includes a pro rata clause requiring ESPN to pay the SEC the same amount per any school for any new members. McMurphy quoting sources when he says that. What's that? Break that down for me, TJ. What's that mean? ESPN signed a deal with the SEC saying, if you add new members, we will pay them whatever we're paying everybody else. There were no stipulations. There are no clauses. It can't be, you can do that, but it's got to be in a new market. You can do that, but it can't be Florida State because they're a disruptor. You can do that, but it can't be Clemson because they're in the same state as another program. No, the deal has already been written. Whenever a team is added, and I'm not telling you it's Florida State. I'm not telling you it's Clemson. I'm not telling you it's North Carolina, Miami, Virginia, whomever. But when a team is added, ESPN has already agreed to pay the SEC whatever they're paying everybody else. Whatever that pie is, it automatically grows. And Sankey knows this. Sankey's not stupid. Sankey's not somebody who is oblivious to this fact. Sankey's not just out here cutting up Brett McMurphy articles from the Action Network like I am to tell you guys what's going on. He knows this. He knows that that's BS about cutting the pie more ways than already have gone because he knows that by adding teams, it's automatically grown. He's not dumb. ESPN knows this. FSU knows this. Clemson knows this. The ACC knows it. Nobody's dumb to this fact. I don't know how widely reported this is, and I appreciate our contacts reaching out to us and giving us this information, but this is not new info. This article's been around for over a year. This trusted Brett McMurphy that everyone loves and everyone knows and everybody knows does a great job. That's not sarcasm. Truly, he does a phenomenal job. Has had this in stone for the last year. Everyone knows. Brett McMurphy knows this. Now, I'm not telling you that Florida State or Clemson are absolutely SEC bound, but here's the truth of the matter. Making it about money is the funniest thing ever. Why would they pay more for FSU in the SEC than the ACC, though? That's what I'll get a comment on in this video. Why would they pay more for Florida State in the SEC than what they're paying in the ACC? It doesn't make any sense. They're paying $44.5 million right now in the ACC. Why would they get up close to 50, 60, 70 elsewhere? You want to know why? Because ESPN's about to drop a bunch of dead weight in the conference. If that's one of your teams, I'm very sorry. I don't mean that to offend you. But when they redo this ACC deal or the ACC falls apart, they're no longer going to be paying Syracuse and Wake Forest and Boston College and some of these other programs $44.5 million a year. They just aren't. And so if they redo a deal with the ACC, that number is going to be lowered. But there's nothing about markets or this, that, and the other. We talk about markets like they matter. We talk about like trying to get into a new market. No, that doesn't matter. It's about number of eyeballs on a TV. It doesn't really matter where the views are coming from. Why would they pay more for Florida State in the SEC than they're paying the ACC? If they stop having to pay for Syracuse, Boston College, Georgia Tech, and Wake Forest, no shots at any of those teams, not trying to give any of those teams a hard time. If you don't like that I use one of those teams, throw one out and put another one in. If they can stop paying for those teams, they could easily afford to move two big boys over to the SEC. And then if you take some more out, a couple of teams go to the Big Ten, Miami, North Carolina, Virginia, go to the Big Ten. Maybe you could afford to pay for a couple more to come in. And it works in reverse. If Florida State, Clemson go to the Big Ten, then ESPN can afford to bring North Carolina, Virginia, NC State, others to the SEC because they don't have that, again, for lack of a better word, I'm not trying to dog anybody's program, they don't have that dead weight weighing them down. I'll tell you what this means, but first I'll tell you what it doesn't mean, right? This is not me telling you that Florida State is an absolute lock to the SEC. It's not me telling you that their home is solidified. But what it does tell you is that every single narrative around markets and money and fit and value and being a disruptor, all of that gets put out there is complete nonsense. It's all leading you down a path to look one way while the other hand does this. Have you ever seen an illusionist? That's what they do. You watch this hand, and then this hand is the one that pulls off the trick. Well, man, we would just need to grow that pie. We don't want to cut our pie in more ways than we already are. Greg Sankey knows that that's not the case, and Brett McMurphy told you that a year ago. They won't be cutting the pie any more than they are. ESPN's going to pay them more as soon as teams get added. ESPN is very aware of what's going on with this. Florida State and Clemson fans have to stop freaking out. I don't care who says it. I don't care who tweets it. We've been on the realignment thing for over a year and a half. Our contacts in this world are great. I'm not telling you they're greater than this person or that person's or McMurphy's or Shears or anything like that. I'm just telling you. We're not going to tell you things or come bring you things because a source told us to make you look at the right hand while the left hand does something else. We will never do that. That's not my MO. I don't care enough. I don't need to make anybody happy. I'm going to tell you what makes sense. I'm going to tell you what our contacts are saying, and Florida State and Clemson fans have to chill out. I'm not telling you you're going to the SEC. I'm not telling you that it's the Big Ten. But I'm telling you, this worry around the Big 12, these anonymous sources and tweets that are talking about disruption and everything else are silly. All of that is silly. Now, you may not agree with all of this, but as soon as Florida State and Clemson find a way out of this ACC mess, they've got a spot. It feels like things are ramping up. That's not me telling you that, oh, by this date, that's going to happen. By this date, that's going to happen. I still believe before 8/15, we will get some kind of clarity, some kind of news. But no matter what you think about any of that, I don't think it's the Big 12 for Florida State and Clemson. I think it's the Big 10 or the SEC. I still think that's what makes sense for both those conferences, whoever ends up getting each of those schools. And I think it's what makes the most sense for Florida State and Clemson. Greg Sankey is not dumb. He absolutely knew what he was doing today, and he put out a quote that he knew people would run with. He knew people would run with, yeah, he's not taking Florida State because they don't want to cut their pie in more ways than they already have. When all the while he knew that that would never be a possibility. That'd never be a reality. And so hats off to him. Props to him for making the right hand do one thing and everybody forgetting about the other side. Hey, this is College Football Addiction. If you haven't already, leave us a comment, let us know what you think about this, and do me a favor, just hit that subscribe button. We don't sell you anything. I don't have a link for you to click or anything like that. You may love it, you may hate it, but hit the subscribe button. We certainly would appreciate that and want to hear your thoughts down below. Am I crazy? Is Sankey pulling off a right hand, left hand trick? What's going on? What do you think? We'll talk to you soon on College Football Addiction.